wonderful to have you back, Shari. Your podcast was very powerful, very moving, talking about things that never get spoken because we can't say the right words. We can't talk about our own sexuality without having some sense of shame. And I don't know why that is, and it shouldn't be that way. So today, with our round two with Shari, we're going to talk more about your coming to where you could um, authentically, first of all, live your life, but then how you started to heal from and deal with what you had been through in your trauma. So that journey and where you're at today is what we want to talk about. So why don't you give us a recap, if you wouldn't mind, of what we discussed and where you came from and now to, and then let's go into some details about how you did the healing that you did.
So I was born and raised in a sex trafficking environment. My parents conditioned me from birth to meet the needs of pedophiles that they put me in contact with, both in our family and in our church organization. And, I was filmed, photographed, sold, traded, you name it. And I experienced all of that from 6 months to about 19 years old when I left home to get married. And, it's been 25 years of pretty much constant engagement in the healing process in one way or another. And, I'm just here today because I feel like after 25 years, I wouldn't say that I'm healed, but I'm healed enough to be able to give back so much of what I have been given by others who have gone through, this process, this healing journey. And, just really happy to be in a place in my life where I feel safe enough and, have good enough boundaries and, feel like I can actually make a difference now and turn this, pain that I've experienced over a lifetime into real purpose and make it, I don't know if worthwhile is the word I would use, but at least purposeful and not for nothing, right?
Sure, but I want to tell you, Shari, that I believe that who the world at this point in time needs to hear from are those who have suffered the most, who have experienced the worst. We are the voices of experience, and that is more valid to the next person who is coming onto the healing journey, wanting to get on that path. And the sooner we can get those who have been harmed onto that path and talking about real things with real survivors who are now thriving. And like you, I don't feel I can never use the word healed because I know that I continue to go, wow, that was a crash and burn. I thought I would do that better. I guess there's more to explore there. There's more to go look at. There's more to be curious about. And there are things that we actually have to physically do and mentally do in order to heal. It isn't just a want to. It's like anything. It's like you want to have, nicer biceps. You got to lift some weights. You can't just want it without doing the work. And I find that often people don't associate those things together. Like it takes caloric expenditure of work, whether it's mental, like 2 grand chess masters playing a chess game. 2 grand masters, I was told by another person that is a therapist, she said they measured the caloric output and it's something like 9,000 calories. That's how intense, right? I'm like, oh, we all got to start playing chess. We'll lose weight.
Wow.
But it was interesting, right? I didn't either. And I was like, well, if that's true, then healing and doing the exercises that we get taught actually repattern and reprogram and build new neural pathways in the brain or repurpose your central nervous system to respond in a different way. If we actually did some of the exercises, it actually will do that. But if you just think,
Yeah.
oh, I know this great information and I never do anything, then
Yeah.
it may not. Even going to a workshop, like for you and I, we
Yeah.
both experienced a workshop at Landmark Forum
Mm-hmm.
that I think changed my life at age 30.
Yeah.
Just the experience of going through that first workshop. I sometimes call it a retreat because I was retreating from the madness of my
Mm.
life and my life experience, going into a place where I totally focused on, kind of the question going in was, who am I?
Mm.
Why does life work and then it just doesn't work? And why can't I,
Yeah.
whatever, blah, 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 fill in the blank? And I
Yeah.
came out of those 3 days a changed, metamorphically speaking, like a butterfly, and I went in as a caterpillar sort of thing.
Absolutely.
But that was work. Going through those
Yeah.
3 days and the way that we were thinking and the what things that we were doing, making a phone call or doing something, they were doing things.
Yeah.
And so anyway, back to you now to give us that wisdom that you have gained. Give us the healing, and how it was hard won and fought, and the path as much as you can, and you do it in your words and your ways. And I'll try not to interrupt because I think you have a ton to teach us. I really do.
Oh, well, I can tell you that the one thing that I did learn is to try everything that comes across your path that calls to you,
Mhm.
right? Um, because one of the things that I've noticed as I've been healing, and more so lately in the last probably 3 or 4 years,
Mhm.
is really looking back and seeing, I felt so alone and isolated going through everything that I went through. But looking back, I can see where there were key people, or a quote, even something that resonated with me, that continued to give me hope, to continue to give me motivation, right? To keep moving forward. Because it is hard work, right? It is ugly. It is painful to dive into those memories, to work through and do the exercises, and to trust somebody else that may be guiding you through that, right? It's not easy, and it's taxing, exhausting work. But when you do find something that even gives you the slightest bit of relief, right? You grasp onto that, like, okay, I'm on the right path here. This is I'm making progress. And it really is about the progress, right? The never giving up. And the biggest thing that I learned was just to show up. I didn't have to know how it was going to go. I didn't have to, I wanted to, right? There was a desperate need to know how it was going to turn out. But I trusted I trusted my gut at the right times sometimes, right? That gave me access to things that helped me develop. And they could be simple things like journaling. Obviously, I was in therapy and counseling doing EMDR work. And, I did a lot of breath work. I've done a lot of holistic stuff. I did Landmark Worldwide. I've done a lot of whatever comes across my path, and I'll test it out. And if it works for me, awesome. I take it. I'll adapt it, adjust it to where it really works for me. Or, if it doesn't, I'll discard that. Um, but honestly, the biggest thing that as I've gone through all of these things that has made the biggest difference and actually solidified it in my body, integrate it within my heart, right? Change the belief system, was sharing my experiences as I went along. Not just the triumphs, but I'm stuck. I can't get out. I don't know what to do. Asking for help. Oh my gosh, asking for help was like the hardest thing for me to do. But once I did that one time, it became a little bit easier the next time and a little bit easier. And it just, I don't, progress, right? It's just about the progress. and the little victories.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said you're not just sharing the triumphs or the breakthroughs, you're sharing the breakdowns. You're sharing
Absolutely.
the low points, that
Yeah.
because life isn't one triumph and one breakthrough after another. The path is broken. The path is full of the big
Yep.
stones in the way. The big boulders are there as well as the little pebbles and the sand that gets between your toes. It's
Yep.
all a part of it. So I love that. And I think, you mentioned a kind of a laundry list of things that you tried, and you said just try it all. And that's
Hmm.
about what I did, except I didn't have enough money when I remember when I was fleeing from a bad relationship, and it was about, I'd had a couple of not bad ones, but they didn't work out, sort of
Yeah.
thing. And I
Yeah.
remember packing up and sending my little boy, away, mommy will be there soon, to his aunt's, and driving away after packing up my things and just crying in this kind of
Yeah.
U-Haul that I was driving about, like, how is this happening again? What will I do? I obviously need a therapist, but I have no money. I don't know
Yeah.
where I'm going to live. I don't have a job. I mean, it was just all of it at once, and it seems so
Yeah.
overwhelming. How did you take your first step? What did you do first?
Hmm.
You
What did I do
remember?
first? Jeez.
Or one of the pivotal ones, maybe, that really made that. I shared one of mine with you before we started.
Yeah. Um, Goodness. I think my I actually trusted um a church member, a church official. I was after my
That must
first.
have been hard when you were being pimped to members of your church by your parents who were members of the same church who were farming you out. That must have been tough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I he suggested it. I was in a singles ward at the time, which is, for young adults, and I was coming out of my first divorce at the time, and he he saw something, right? Like he was I don't know. He just was aware. He was aware. He paid attention, right? And I don't know what his background was, if he had any training in trauma or anything like that, but he suggested that I go see a counselor. And I had never been to a counselor a day in my life. No one had ever mentioned it to me. I was 26 at the time. I was a mom for the 2 years, really struggling, and he saw that, right? He saw that no matter how much I tried to mask it. Um, and I ignored him for about 6, 7, 8 months. I did not go, but something kept nagging at me, right? Like, what? Maybe there is something. Maybe he knows something I don't know. You know, um, I was very leery of it because of the past. I didn't know what I was stepping into. But I went to this counselor, and she was a woman who had sexual abuse in her past, and she was um, open to sharing her triumph over that, and what it was like for her, right? Like, not details about her experiences, but the feelings of it, right? How she felt growing up and felt as a new mom, and all of these things, and she shared that with me. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but because she did that, it was I didn't even have any memories at the time, but it resonated. Okay, maybe this woman knows something I don't know. And I chose to trust her and just take on the practices that she gave me. And it started to make a difference in the raising of my child, which was my ultimate concern. Is I didn't want to do anything that could harm him. And I was being triggered a lot with the anger, just a lot of anger. And I didn't know what that was. And I didn't know where it was coming from. And I just thought it was, I'm a single mom, I'm broke, I'm dealing with an ex-husband, current life circumstances. But every current life circumstance was overwhelming and completely undoable. And she started giving me practices to just be present with what I was dealing with right then. And then she gave me practices to deal with some of the memories that started coming up. And she was really the first person that I trusted with myself. And this, I didn't even think it would be a healing journey. I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea what would unfold over the next 25 years. No clue.
Wow. So you have no clue. You think, well, maybe I'll go a few times and that'll be that,
Yep. I
or maybe
really
I'll
did think
figure
that.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You'll
really
figure
did.
some things out. I remember in my second marriage where I was like, okay, um, he's nice. Uh, I don't have to go to work. I have a little boy, same thing,
Hmm.
little 2-year old. And I can kind of just be at home, which is kind of what I always wanted to do and what I always thought I would do. I wanted to do what my mom did. I
Yeah.
didn't go to school. I think maybe I was about the end, and you're a little younger than me, so this may not have been your experience, but we were encouraged, like, get an education, but your path is you're going to get married and have kids and
Oh,
stay
yeah.
home.
Yep.
That was the teaching. Like, that's
Sure.
the right thing to do, and that's the thing I wanted to do. I mean, I really, I loved kids. I loved to cook and sew, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and bake cookies, and I'll raise the next
Yeah.
group of Osmonds.
Yeah.
I'll have the Osmond kids, and we'll get them singing and acting and dancing, and it'll be great. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. And so it's very interesting that in my second marriage, when all was calm, for there was, I was really trying to look at myself, and whatever. This was before that other experience that I talked about earlier, before I had to kind of run away and into the abyss, not knowing what I would do. At this point, I had a home, a roof over my head, and I could do what I wanted to do. And it's the first time that I actually started to do film and television work in Salt Lake, in that area.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know that was a possibility. It was all good. And then all of a sudden, I had this cloud following me around, and I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
I'd never experienced depression before. And I did. And I thought, oh, do I need to talk to somebody? And thank goodness that I had the same experience where someone said, you might be experiencing depression. And I'm like, well, why would I experience depression? Now all the things look right in my life. And
Mm.
they're like,
Yeah.
because your chemicals, this is someone that knew my story, my childhood
Yeah.
story. I wasn't really in some public way. Once in a while, I'd go and give a fireside or talk to a group of people if I was asked to talk about, how you can overcome, pull up your bootstraps and move on. I
Yeah.
would do things like that, but I didn't. I would never had considered that this thing that was following me around, like I had a cement block on my head. Literally, there was a physical sensation as well as an emotional one. And so I did. I sought out a counselor, and I got on I think it was Prozac, maybe it was the granddaddy of them all or whatever, for a few months, and then it lifted, and then it was gone, and then I never did it again. I never had to take it again. So it was kind of like this weird little thing. What I didn't know is that there was much more healing that was going to have to
Right.
happen beyond psychotherapeutic drugs that
Yeah.
helped me rebuild some serotonin in my, I guess, because it really was a short-lived thing for me, and I
Yeah.
was back to kind of my bouncy happy self, but
Yeah.
it's not over.
No.
So that
No.
started it. So then, when you were married a second time?
Yeah. So,
You're one little
yeah,
boy.
I
You're
was
2 years
married.
old.
I was married the second time when I was about 32, and my son was about 8 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up marrying someone who had he was a war vet from Desert Storm,
Mm.
and he had PTSD, like just tremendous PTSD from that. And we didn't work out. We remained friends and all of that, but we neither one of us was ready for that relationship. And he needed to work on himself. I needed to work on myself some more, and so we parted
Yeah.
ways. But and then I was married again about 2 years later, and then had my second son. So they're about 10 years apart, which I really needed that time in between. Looking back,
Mhm.
I really needed that time in between to heal. Um, I didn't know what I was doing, Jan. I had no clue how to be a
Right.
mom. No clue.
And what's so interesting is I feel like, you kind of, I feel like I was always a loving, like I loved my child, but I
Yeah,
had no idea how to really care for and love myself.
yeah,
And that becomes trauma for your child.
yes,
And
yes.
that is something that we often, there's a misstep or a uh, what do you call that? A disconnect, a
Hmm.
disconnect.
Yeah.
And so, in wanting to be a good mom, but not knowing what you're doing and having abuse, I think it's interesting that you married someone with PTSD because they compare
Hmm.
childhood sexual abuse, assault, and rape, which you experienced all of those things, and
Hmm.
molestation, as having the exact same emotional and mental outcomes as
Yeah,
combat war veterans.
yeah, yeah. We had a
It is the
lot in
same.
common.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
PTSD, only you experienced it
Yep.
within the walls of your own home as a child and a young person. And I actually played a little part of this book at this speaking engagement that I just did, and it just says, in the book, it's like those same outcomes of rage,
Mm.
of and you don't even know where it comes from, the same outcomes of deep pain and sadness, and you're like, what is happening? Where's it?
Yeah.
Depression, that's what I just described. Anxiety, not being afraid of everything, not having any
Yeah.
self-esteem. Same exact thing as a combat veteran, because
Mhm.
your in your case especially, but in any child's case where they are being abused by someone that they know, or that should be a caregiver, should be
Mhm.
someone that's nurturing them, the combat veteran knows the enemy.
Yeah.
For the child, the enemy is also the caretaker. The
Yes.
enemy is also the person that's supposed to love them and nurture them. It is the most confusing, and
Yes.
it is absolutely PTSD. So, as you go from second marriage to third marriage, tell us
Mhm.
some of the other things that maybe, as you were going, I have no idea what I'm doing. What were you doing? What were you seeking out? What was happening?
Yeah. So for the while I was raising my first son, everything that I learned in counseling or as I, developed myself, whatever I did for myself, I did for him. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I learned to sit down and let him know, hey, this was not your fault. Mommy's upset about something else. It doesn't have anything to do with you. You're a wonderful boy and I love you so much. And, just reassure him that my upset had nothing to do with him. Well, I didn't know about that, right? Nobody ever told me that their upset wasn't about me. And in fact, they took their upset out on me more often than not, right? So it was those things that I would say, okay, if I can give it to him, then I need to be able to give it to myself as well. Now, I could give it to him much easier than I could myself because, you know, I just didn't love myself yet, right? There was too much shame layers and all of that. But I could see what a difference it was making in how he went about doing things, right? He was so much more free than anything I had ever experienced before, right? And I got very curious about his world because he lived in this very exuberant, excited, every little thing that he accomplished was just pure joy and satisfaction, right? And I'm just like, where does he get that? And I wanted that. I wanted that for myself, right? But if he had it, and whatever I could do to provide the means and the space for him to be able to continue to do that, then that's what I was interested in learning in therapy. Like how can I do this for both of us, kind of thing. And so I just took that approach, and I remained curiosity has been my biggest friend, right? I just, what's that? I don't get that. Somebody's doing something that I can't do. I can't be that free. Or somebody's having an emotion that I don't even recognize, right? And I want to comfort them, like I have this instinct to help, to support, but I'm so uncomfortable with feelings and crying and emotions and all of, I mean, it's like, oh, let me pat you on the back and feel really awkward, right? But I wanted that. And so I got curious about why I couldn't do that. And if there was something I needed to know that was holding me back from that, I wanted to know that. So I did meditation. I did a ton of meditation. Just looking, I went to alternative holistic approaches, plant medicine, CBD, THC, mushrooms, whatever I could find to heal this part of my brain. Because I didn't want to be on any kind of medication. I didn't want to be on medication for depression or for anxiety or the PTSD. I wanted it out. I wanted to shift whatever I needed to shift in my body so that it was balanced again, right? And I didn't know what that was. I had no freaking clue. And it took 23 years to find it or be ready for it. But that's what I'm saying about just being open to whatever comes into your view. It's coming into your view for a reason, right? And I never stop. I'm not done. I'm never done. There's no end to this journey. The journey is the journey. The journey is the juice. So,
Oh, I like that. The journey is the juice. You know what? It's true. If you came to the end of the journey, like, oh, here's the end.
yeah, then what?
Yeah, that isn't it. Maybe your journey can change from being one of just, I mean, I heard that I learned this also recently, that you can have healing like burnout.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
like I've been working on this so hard. It's like playing that chess game. I just
Yeah.
burned 9,000 calories. I got to take a break. I'm at burnout,
Yeah.
from healing. And I
Yeah.
thought that was interesting. I had never considered that. And yet I do remember backing up when the documentary came out in 2019, and I had so many interviews
Yeah.
every single day. And there came a point where I was like, I can't hold any more stories.
Yeah.
I can,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell my own story about, 3 or 4 times every day, whether it's radio or a podcast or a
Yeah.
interview for, whatever it was for. It was just it's weird to have something in your life go viral like that
Mm-hmm.
when you're not expecting that. You just were trying to help by sharing your story, and it finally got shared, and then it went nuts, and you're not ready for
Right.
handling all of it. And I had
Yeah.
to take a big huge step back from what I thought was helping. My own healing path became overwhelming, and burnout happened. And
Yeah.
I know that, I knew I wanted to be able to come back into this place, but I had to do it in a more healthy way. So at that point, I started trying other modalities. I have a cousin who, is a massage therapist, but she also, looks at a whole other ranges of modalities for healing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I did some work with her and some other things, to be able to get to the next part and go, okay, I can do this better instead of trying to hold everybody's stories inside
Yeah.
of me. I can just be a vessel, kind of like a tunnel where it passes through me and goes out the other side, not because I'm dismissing their stories, but because I can't solve them, but I can give them the grace of having listened. And I can
Yeah.
give them the grace of putting them on a path, maybe, or suggesting this or that, something that might have worked for me. Because as I say before every podcast, this, we do not dispense therapy here, but we give ideas, we
Mm-hmm.
give stories, and something that might have worked for you will or will not work for someone else. But
Right.
this collective of talking, we are the healers. People who have experienced these things are here to help others in their healing process. I know that for a
Yep.
fact. So
Same.
we are experts because of what we've been through. So as you go through marriage number 3, you have your second son. 10 years
Mm-hmm.
between the first and the second one. What starts to appear at that point? You've done some more therapy, you're looking, you're curious, which is a huge thing about me too. I'm very curious. um, I call myself an investigator. I like to
I
investigate
like
life
that.
and people and religions and dogmas and philosophies, and that's what I like. I like to do
Yeah.
all of that. I think it's kept me kind of sane, and I like to be like I'm my own medical doctor, my own psychiatrist. Like, okay, that tactic that groomer used on me, what's that one called? What's that brainwashing tactic called? I get very
Yeah.
curious, and I and
Yeah.
I that's helpful when you can kind of look at
Absolutely.
yourself like a different person and go, oh, that's what they used on you. I
Yeah.
don't know if you
Sometimes it.
experienced any of that, because being sex trafficked from your own home,
Yeah.
from your own pedophilia uh, parents that were, I mean, I don't know. You've come to a place of great, like, I forgave them and I believe they did the best they could, which, I've thought a lot about that. And I thought, oh, I'm going to have a lot of people that are going to be writing in and going, that's crazy. They should be in jail. I know, because I've
Yeah.
been doing this for a while, and I get a lot of that about, you're
Yep.
living in la la land if you don't think your parents are culpable. And I'm like, no, my parents did the best they could. My parents didn't know. Your parents knew something, and for
Mm-hmm.
you to get to that place and for them to do what they did and allow others and have it filmed and photographed and whatever,
Yep.
tell us a little more about that piece of your journey, because that's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah. So third marriage, I really took a step back from the therapy pieces. I thought I was doing really well. I had my second son. It was a completely different experience than the first one. 10 years ago, I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit more. Um, so I focused on career and I got my bachelor. I went back to school, got my bachelor's in psychology. So and then I just continued to read books about it and journal and do some of the other, meditation and things that I had been doing. But I quit doing the really intense therapy work. Um, and and it was not good. Like, I went into a depression. My body literally shut down on me when I was about 40, and just high blood pressure. I mean, I never had any issues with my health at all. It was my body just was like, you know what? I'm trying to get your attention here. And you've been off doing the career thing and the school thing, and that's great. But there's some more stuff that needs to be worked on. And so that's when it took me another 2 years after my body telling me it's time before I ended the marriage that I was so unhappy in and not moving forward. So once that marriage ended, then, I lived on my own for the first time with my son. For a little bit, and then I met Terry, and then we moved in together, and we started that path. And um, it's really great. I think one of the biggest differences that I've had in my life is a partner. I had 3 marriages, but not any partners. And this marriage is very much a partnership. It didn't start out that way, I think. Both of us had, codependency issues and different things that we had to work through. And we definitely didn't have great boundaries with each other. But we were both headed in the same direction, if you will. We were both wanting to grow and develop. We were both wanting to be accountable and responsible for our own lives, not be victims to anything that may have happened to us in the past. We were both dedicated to a family and healing our family and moving us forward. And so, having that partnership and having a partner that, could call you out when you're being a 6 year old baby in the relationship is pivotal to change, right? Because so much we don't recognize when we're melting down and not able to respond like an adult. And so these conversations, these fights between couples and people and all these relationships we have, nothing gets resolved because it's two little kids arguing with their traumatized, everything, and it doesn't move you forward. So having a partner that is dedicated to their growth and healing in their own right, without me would be doing that anyway, was important to my healing. I needed someone who was engaged in that process, for herself, right?
Yeah.
And that's what
And I
made a
think
difference.
that's amazing, because I think that, you know, having a partner who actually will be working on their own, they're working on themselves. They know that they're on a journey too, whether they've been through sexual assault or not.
Hmm.
You're both um, on a journey, and then coming together and being committed to being the kind of partner that a partner needs to be on the journey, on their
Yeah,
own individual journey, right?
absolutely.
So, so how did you come to the place? So you've been married to three men. You are now
Hmm.
married to Terry.
Yep.
How did you come to your into your sexuality finally throughout all of the things that you had been through? I mean, not
Yeah.
only, being trafficked, growing up in a religious environment, even in the midst of being trafficked,
Yeah.
this is okay, this isn't okay. We know how the LDS church and many others, for that matter, how they, look down on, or they frown upon, or they say, well, just, you can be who you are, just don't have any good sex in your life or whatever. Can you
Right.
talk,
Right.
can you talk about that? Because I really think
Yeah.
people need to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think you might be disappointed in the story. It was a
I'm not.
non-event. It was a non-event, right? At the
Right.
end of my third marriage, I literally just got on an app, was getting ready to just do the, looking for a male, and I
Hmm.
hit female instead. No thought, no conscious thought about it. It was just very much, I just did it, and it sort of unfolded very quickly from there. I met Terry within, 2 weeks, started talking to her on the phone. So there was no thought to it, and it seemed very natural, to be honest. Like it wasn't a big to do. I came out to my sons first, my siblings and family and coworkers. I mean, I came out to everybody, and not a single person was shocked. Number one, because I just, nobody was shocked with it. So it was very easy. I think one person in my life gave me a hard time about it, and that was because he was still in the church, very much believed that, and it was not acceptable for him. So he couldn't accept it for me. And that's okay, you know.
Yeah.
But other than that, everyone else was very kind. I've never been discriminated against. I've never had anybody give me a hard time about it. But I had my names removed from the church, you know, 30 years ago. So I haven't been affiliated with them at all. And, my wife had a different story. And you might want to ask her about that during her podcast, because when
I
she came
will.
out, that was a very different conversation. But, yeah, for me, it was a non event. It just seemed very natural. And I was finally just like, this is me. Thank you. Like it was such
Yes.
a relief to be with who I wanted to be with.
Oh, no, I'm not disappointed at all. If anything, it makes me emotional. We
Hmm.
need to hear all those stories just
Yeah.
like that. It
Yeah.
was the natural, it was so natural.
It was. It was natural and easy. It was probably the easiest thing that, it was definitely the easiest relationship that I've ever been in, and the most fruitful in every possible way. So,
Yeah, you had a partner
a real partner. Yeah.
for real.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. No, I couldn't be more happy with your story, and I will be asking Terry about that, because I'm going to podcast
Wonderful.
with her too. So your wife and I are going to talk about a lot of things
Great.
I'm sure you've already talked about, so it won't be like talking behind your back, Sherry, but it will be
No.
a great conversation to see,
Yeah.
her perspective from a survivor, as a family member, somebody that loves you,
Yeah.
and for your abuse and also what her own experience was as well, because
Yeah.
nobody gets out of life without some trauma, without some
No.
real,
Yeah.
you know,
And
having to grapple.
loving somebody who was as traumatized as I was is not, that was not easy for her. It's still not on occasion, but you know,
Sure.
we talk it through, and
Yeah.
we look
Well, and
forward.
that's where you're committed to the other person's
Yeah,
journey as well as to your own. You have your own identity, and you have your couple identity, and you have
absolutely.
your journeys that are separate and together.
Yes.
And I think that that's what makes it so healthy, is when you can have all of those variations
Yeah.
on the same theme, right? They're a
Agree.
variation on a theme. You don't play the same six notes in any song,
That's right.
or the same eight, because it's all in octaves, and you mix them up, and you come out with beautiful, a beautiful symphony that has minor chords as well as major
That's
ones. So
right. It is
I
beautiful.
really love that. That's beautiful. Okay, so now you and Terry are moving forward in your partnership. What other things on that part of the healing did that bring up? Because I know becoming a mother brought
Mm,
new things up for me, getting divorced brought new things up for me, getting married again brought new stuff, getting divorced again. I'm with you. I've been
yeah.
through, some stuff in life. And so
Yeah.
what's the next
Well,
piece
the
of that
next
healing
piece of
journey for
that
you?
would have been, merging families, trying to merge families. And I wouldn't even say that we really tried to merge them. It was clear for me early on that um, being around other people's kids, like I had never been with anybody else that had had their own kids, and then we brought them together. So just that
Mm-hmm.
was a learning opportunity. But she had a daughter. I didn't have a daughter. I had two sons. And so that brought a whole different level of healing for me that I never would have had the opportunity to go through. She was a trigger for me on so many different things. Nothing she was doing wrong other than being a kid, being herself. But for me, it was, I've never been around a little girl before, so there was like, whoo, little girl coming up, jealousy, like this. It took years to work through the layers of healing needed just to be able to be with our daughter for me, right? Because I there was a reason I didn't give birth to daughters when I was having daughters, because I don't know that the outcome would have been as good for me, to be honest. It was tough. It was really tough.
Well, when you consider that you had no childhood,
Yeah.
that you were never treated like a little girl,
Yeah.
that the little girl never had her time and her day in the sun,
Yep.
you know, that's it makes perfect sense to
Well,
me,
and it's
because I've blended a family, and a few, they all had daughters. Every single guy that I married who
mm,
had a child had a daughter or daughters. And that happened, at three different times. One daughter, and then one daughter, and then four daughters. And my stepdaughter passed away, and it was interesting how at those different points in my life, what I could handle
yeah.
and what I couldn't,
Yeah.
and the jealousy and the feelings of, I don't know what, some I can't even really name what they all were. I'm still trying to investigate what that's about,
Well, one of the
but it's real.
one it's absolutely real. It's absolutely real, and it had me have to deal with things, growing up the way that I did. Everything had to be earned, from food to sleep to playtime to everything. If I wanted something, I mean, our basic needs were not met unless we did what we needed to do first, right? It was like our chores. It was set up like chores. And so, when I when I married Terry, or when we moved in together, and I saw her taking care of her kids and buying them treats, and they had all these toys and clothes and things, and I was just like, but they haven't earned any of it. Like, why are we buying toys every day, or why are we buying a treat, or why are we giving them an extra this? Like nothing's been earned, and oh, that was really layers and layers of that for me to have to deal with, and it kept me separate. It kept me separate from her because I didn't want to put any of my stuff. I knew it was my stuff, right? I didn't want to put any of my stuff onto her. And she picked up on it. I mean, these are very perceptive human beings, these little people, right? And that just breaks my heart that it took me so long to work through those things that I needed to work through with her. And we're still building a relationship now. It's been 6 years, and she was 6 when I met her, and it's just as she grows and I heal, and it's always changing. Nothing's ever the same from day to day, and so we don't get attached to any one way because it'll change. It'll change. So,
Right? Because then she's going to go through her, teenage and
yeah.
teenage years, just like, and she doesn't have the background that you had, but she will still have
Oh yeah.
her own things,
Yep.
and then that will be a different equation to solve.
Yeah.
It really is true. It's like you don't solve something one time because of the nuances of life and the way that we keep progressing and changing, and the people we interact with are progressing and changing,
Yeah.
and it's not something that you can decide how 2 plus 2 is 4, and it always will be, and it'll stay the same, and that's not true
Yeah.
in our relationships at all. So I can really relate, I guess, to that. And I've asked myself many, many times questions about, boy, if I could have just operated at a little more mature of a place, maybe I could have made that work better.
Yeah.
Maybe I could have built that relationship stronger. And I've realized that one of the things that you can't do is should on
Mhm.
yourself. I should have, I could have, should have,
Yeah.
because I really feel like at least all the survivors and their stories that I have listened to, that I have been privileged to have people tell me, people, we try to do the best that we really can. It's not like we aren't trying. It's just we don't have certain emotional tools or certain, mental and physical health tools or development, even because we were arrested in that
Yeah.
by not having a natural development in our childhood. And at certain points, I had a very, very happy childhood
Yeah.
till I was 12 and woke up in the motorhome.
Yeah.
Then it all changed. And so for you, when it's your primary caregivers who have started this path, you had like no, I mean, I hate to say no chance, because obviously you are healing and you have done tremendous things in your life and you're now sharing. So if you were to be able to go back and tell the little girl
Hmm.
something that you wish you would have heard or known then, to some other survivor that might be listening to this podcast, what's your one piece of advice? Is there one thing that sticks out?
It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It wasn't your fault. And it's
That
okay
makes me
okay to love yourself.
cry.
Yeah. It wasn't your fault. It's okay to love yourself, and don't give up. Don't ever give up.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that. Well, that made us both a little teary
It did.
because it resonates. It hits home.
Yeah.
It's not your fault. Never give up.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So as you progress forward from here, what are the plans? What are your
Yeah.
plans now? Tell
So
us what's going on in
use my cat here.
that.
Yeah, so the
Hello,
plans
Cass.
so the plans now, so Terry and I have our foundation, Shuniya Foundation. We established it almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in April. We are in the process of raising funds so that we can support women that have been sex trafficked, that may need additional resources. So we'll take them through our revolutionary healing model and practices that we have experiences with, and pay for therapies and just different things so that they don't, if they don't have the resources, we can provide the resources. So we'll work with other organizations in the valley, in Canada, across the United States, wherever they may be located, so that we can get them the resources they need, whether it's education, financing, credit repair, like it doesn't matter, like whatever stage of their process, we want to be able to provide their service either by ourselves or partnering with someone else. So we're doing that, and just speaking up. Any opportunity I get to talk about healing, that's what I want to talk about. And so I'm just taking every opportunity, like what you presented here for me, which I so greatly appreciate being invited, Jan, to this podcast, because this is what we need more of, you know. And I can't stand the suffering, so I have to do what I can do, right? And if that's using my voice to share my story and let people know that it is possible to heal even from the most disgusting, horrifying blah that you could possibly imagine, it is possible. And we just need to help each other. We need to help each other. It's the only way.
Uh, I before we started podcasting, I shared with Shari an experience that I just had, and I just was blurting it out about this young girl. Her parents died. She gets adopted from a foreign country to come here, and then those parents do the same thing to their brand new 12-year-old adopted little girl. They and they're not stupid people. They were, very highly educated, and sex trafficked her, and then gave her basically over to a much older man at around age 17. And she came to my speaking engagement, and as I was trying to make sense of how this happens, and I hear thousands of stories, I read them, I hear them, I get them from all different sources. And as I left, I was just telling Shari, I've been crying about it, in last night and today, and just like, problem is when she asked me, well, what do I do next? She's in a shelter at the moment for domestic violence. And she said, but there's nothing else. It's just shelter. There's no programs. They don't have. And I'm like, okay, if we can compare what this kind of trauma does to the combat veterans
Mm,
who experience PTSD, to the sexually assaulted, abused, molested, trafficked, incestual, uh, if we could make the comparison,
mhm.
would people give? Would they give so that we can actually help people heal? Because that's been my whole thing, is there is hope. Look at me,
Mhm.
yes, and look at this story, and there is hope. Look at you, look at your story. There is hope.
Yeah.
If we can get the modalities and like, you have a program, I've been developing a program, but where is the funding?
Yeah.
We spend millions of dollars, basically supporting, um, veterans, which is wonderful. We should. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying, if there are 20 children, the statistics are that for every combat soldier who has been in combat, who suffers from PTSD, extreme
Mm,
suffering, for that young man, or that, whatever age man, mostly, and some women now,
mhm.
if there are 20 children being assaulted, trafficked, molested, and raped in their own homes, or by a close friend or family member, um, neighbor, congregant, someone, if the same things are true of those children, now adults, who are suffering from extreme PTSD, depression, anxiety, and all of the things that happen when you're stuck in a state of rage or pain or sadness. You can't function.
Mm-hmm.
You are not able to do the things. There was a study done that it said a woman who has been sexually assaulted or raped as a child or a young person, teenager, will lose out on over $1 million in revenue throughout her life of not being able to hold a job, not being able to ask for a raise. She has no self-confidence or esteem. The days of work that she's depressed or she's in anxiety or she has to take a step back
Mm-hmm.
and she gets demoted or she can't even go to work and she's not paid for those days. They did this long study, like long time, or I'll have to find it because I thought it was so fascinating that over
Yeah.
the course of her work and life career, if she does not find the healing that she needs, the therapy, the EMDR, the workshops, the actual programs that actually we work at
Mm-hmm.
that are available, but she couldn't afford them,
Yep.
like how I was feeling, she will lose out on that much over the course of her career and her work life.
Yep.
And I'm like, how do we make that comparison so that people will fund that? We spend millions of dollars, and again, not that this isn't a worthy cause. Sex trafficking of children overseas is horrific. But who are the people that are paying for those trafficked children?
Yeah. U.S. men.
They're the businessmen from
Mm-hmm.
the US
That's right.
and Europe. They're people who have stuff in life. They're going to a third world country and buying 11-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's horrific. That does deserve funding.
Yeah.
What the disconnect for me is that people are not comparing
Mm-mm.
the abuse, rape, molestation, and incest in someone's home, whether you're a boy or a girl, to the same level of what has happened to a combat veteran and what happens to someone who is trafficked, kidnapped, or trafficked in a foreign country.
Yeah.
And we have millions of survivors.
Yes, we do.
Of that kind of abuse in this country alone.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to do the math, it's like 2 billion people on the planet, 1 billion people that are children now, that are being abused in some country, including our own. And then 1 billion people who are adults who have come out of that, who are muddling through, trying to figure out how to fix their PTSD. And there are no programs.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it. You're a single mom and running from a bad relationship because of what happened in your childhood. You have no money to buy a therapist.
Mm-mm.
And I say buy because you have to buy it.
Yeah.
You have no money to buy therapy like EMDR. You have no money to, even the fact that you had enough funds to do cannabis, to do a ketamine treatment or mushrooms or whatever, anything to find relief is what we're looking for.
Yep.
We have to get together and make this happen.
Yes.
So what you're trying to do, I am so in support of. I want to know every healing modality part of your plan. I want to have every part of my plan and to look at them and go, where do they cross over? They probably all intersect.
I'm sure they do.
Because what I've done.
Yeah.
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 That's what we need. And that's what we got to do it together somehow. We've got to join the forces.
Yeah,
so
I
that we
agree,
can get
because
the funding.
Really, trauma is trauma, and compound trauma, which was, what I experienced for that period of time in that environment, we pass it along to the next generation, whether we want to or not. Like, just in our DNA, we pass it along, right? So in order to, it doesn't matter if it's a vet trauma or a war trauma or sexual abuse trauma or physical trauma. The effects and the impacts are the same, and we do know enough now about how trauma works, how it stays in the body, how it adjusts the whole chemicals in the brain. We know enough about it. We have enough experts that are coming out speaking about it. Every weekend there's a trauma convention you can watch and get informed, right? And so, yes, we have to come together and work together to get the funding to help the people that don't have access to the resources that I had access to or that you had access to, right? We need to be able to do that. It's the only way to shift this on a massive scale so that people know that they can heal, have resources and access to be able to heal, and then the support as they go through it, right? And the continued support and the continued development of community and just the ripple effect of all of it, right? There has to be a ripple effect.
Yeah, and there will be
Mm-hmm.
if we can get it started in a way that just, it's like a movement has to begin. And I don't know if it's going to just have to stay in the hands of primarily, women. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know, because historically it's, the patriarchal order of things, and it's men who make the rules. It's men who run the religions. It's men who, basically have a upper in their business, in the business. I mean, it just is. And I'm not trying to put men down, because I have a lot of wonderful men in my life that I love, that are supportive. It's not that. I'm just trying to say that somehow I think people, their first reaction is to just turn away. Like, I can't handle knowing this. But if we don't keep telling our stories, and we don't bring the focus to go, no, it's not 1 in a million women like they thought it was in 1982.
Right.
The leading psychotherapy textbook of 1982 says, we believe that there's about 1 woman in 1 million, and there were 100 million women in the United States at that time.
Yeah.
We think that incest happens to about 1 in 100 in 1 million women. So that would be 100 women, because there were only 100 million women in the United States. That's the leading textbook in 1982.
Yeah.
That doesn't acknowledge PTSD as a thing. That doesn't happen until 1989.
Yeah. So 10 years into my abuse, they're spouting statistics that aren't even remotely valid, because we don't know. And they're not any better today. Do you know that I didn't even know? I would never have termed what happened to me as sex trafficking until I shared my story with Catherine Lee of Pure Hope Foundation, who has a ranch and homes for women that have been sex trafficked. And she provides housing for them and therapy and all of this. And I was introduced.
Oh my gosh, I've got to get that girl that was at my conference. I've got to hook her up, because she was just like, I don't know what to do. I have no money. I have no support. I have no family. I have no one.
We can get her help. We can get her help. I have
Catherine
so many
Lee.
contacts.
Okay, finish your story. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have interrupted. Catherine Lee.
So Catherine
That's
Lee,
what you said her name was?
Yeah, Catherine Lee.
Okay.
So I was on the phone. She's the executive director of Pure Hope Foundation, and I was sharing my story, and she said, Shari, you were trafficked. By definition, you were trafficked. You were underage, involved in sexual, like, I didn't know that. I never used those words. I had been molested. I had been raped. I had been sexually abused. There was incest in my family. These are words that I, like, I was molested for the first 10 years is what I always used to say when I first started remembering. That didn't even begin to describe what I was going through. But those are the words that I used because I didn't know any different. And so until I educated myself, until I, people would tell me, no, that's what this is, and that's what this, and gave it labels so that I could begin to break that down. That's what we need to do for people. right? This is happening in our neighborhoods. I was raised in an environment where I had friends. It was happening to them. They were in the same religion, the same school, the same neighborhood. These things don't happen in a vacuum. They're happening everywhere. Wake up.
I'm raising my hands like, yeah, like let's wake up and hallelujah to say the reality, because that is truly what people absolutely do not want to believe,
Nope.
and do not want to accept, and do not want to hear about.
No, because then they'll have to
And
do
we
something about it.
absolutely,
Then they would have to do something
yes, the
about it,
only
Jan.
thing,
And nobody
right, they'd
wants to
have to
touch
do
that.
something about it.
Nobody wants to touch that. It's ugly and yucky and nobody wants it. But you know what? It's here and it's not going away. And we deserve to heal. And our families do not deserve to suffer because we're not healed yet.
Right.
So
that's exactly it. That's your message is exactly the same thing that I started on my path a few years earlier than you did, telling my story and knowing that we have to knowing that I wanted people to have hope.
Yeah.
And then getting deeper into the telling of my story and getting into the statistics that it's so many people, and then knowing people's stories, like it wasn't just a statistic anymore. Yep. Now it's people, faces of hundreds and thousands of people that I have seen and heard from and met and interviewed. I just am like, why is the whole world not standing on their heads to get this healing to happen, to put the funds where it needs to be? Because the outcomes of not are addiction and alcohol and cutting and anorexia and bulimia and divorce and depression and anxiety and divorce again and all of the things that, and crime.
Yeah.
And passing the trauma onto the next generation who we never wanted to do that to. That was never something that I got my baby, who it was so hard for me to have him. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm so lucky. I didn't know I had endometriosis. I didn't know that I had problems and miscarriages, and all of that could have been emotional and mental trauma as well as my body.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I believe it's all tied together. And so the fact that I had him, I never wanted him to go through trauma. And yet he has suffered extreme amounts of trauma because of my own unsolved healing, because I wasn't there yet. And I had to learn everything, it feels like, the hard way. And so if we think it's 25% of the world, 25% of the population in the United States of America, the land of the free, are not free.
No.
They are not free. They are not brave. No. They are kids and teenagers and young married people who are operating from the mind of a 6-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 17-year-old.
Yeah.
Because we are not putting the resources where they need to go.
No.
Think of all the other things that could disappear or at least be greatly diminished.
Oh, absolutely.
If this was dealt with.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we had this amazing conversation, and once again that I have found such a kindred spirit and such an amazing human being
thank you.
To spend this hour with. Really, Shari, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. This has been remarkable. I'm so glad we got connected. I really am. And we have so much more that we can do together. So I look forward to talking to you some more about that.
And I do too. And I can't wait. And in fact, as you will get you into the community, and maybe we can have our own little community. I have a Thrivivors. I don't know if I told you that. I think we talked about it last time. Yeah. So I created this Thrivivors community, and I'm creating this program based on these 12 transformational breakthroughs that actually have science and clinical and all of the things to back them up that they actually work in the healing process. So I've been working on this for a long time, but I knew the first step was telling your story. I know that that is number one in the healing journey. It has to happen, whether you write it and then you speak it, whether it's to a small community, like in our community, people who've never told their story before or never told their story to a group of people who actually listen and don't judge and don't blame them and don't interrupt them. You know, that's a new experience for survivors, you know, because people want to fix it or they want to downplay it or they want to minimize it because it's just too hard.
Yeah, it
you
is.
know, so I knew that was step one. So that's happening in the community. And all of the community members at one point or another are like, how do we get this kind of thing to happen to the younger people? Because most of the people there, and I have some men there as well as women, are older, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, up to in their 70s. And it's like, I said, it is going to happen sooner because the young people have that phone thing in their hand. They know the terms, they know stuff that we didn't know. We didn't know that this was wrong. There are still plenty of people around the world who are being abused at age 3 that don't know the difference. That takes education.
Absolutely.
That is where we have to change laws. Like your first, you know, vocabulary words are, this is a penis, this is a vagina, this is okay, this is not okay, this is rape, this is consent, this is, I mean, it's like that has to happen. And people right now are like, oh, I would never let my, you know, kids have this information at this age. And I'm like, well, that's because you're not raping your kids, you're not pimping your kids out, your kids aren't being trafficked in their own home. The kids that are
need that
have no one.
Yeah, that's right.
They need that information.
Yes, they do.
And then you change things through legal litigation and public policy changes so that the funding for healing and reparation of all of this damage to young people can be started, you know, when they're 12, 20, 25,
earlier than
before all, way earlier.
Absolutely.
And that they can afford it. It's either part of their insurance. I mean, if this isn't just as important as cancer, then what is? I don't really understand. I just don't think the connection has been made to the masses anyway. It's definitely, we know that. We're survivors. We know that this is like so pervasive, but most people are still sitting in their church congregations going, well, that happens to other people, but not here. Not in my neighborhood, not in my family, not in my church. I'm like,
but then you watch the news just over the last week and there's been like, what, 12, 16 different religious leaders and pillars of the community that have all been arrested. And, you know, it's like, come on. Start paying attention.
And that's in your local news. And your local news. And your local news.
Absolutely.
It's not like national story here. No, we're talking about in our local communities and schools and religious organizations, and those people belong to some family.
That's right.
So we know it's it's touching every family.
Everywhere.
And you know what, no matter what your political leanings are, it doesn't matter. We all should be united in help in this. This is not hard.
The whole world benefits when people heal, right? Healed people heal other people. Hurt people hurt people. So the solution is clear. Like, let's heal ourselves. Let's heal each other. Let's help heal those who can't heal themselves, and let's move on to something way better.
Move it forward now.
Yes.
Way better. I have a way better life.
Yeah, me too.
Than I ever could have had I not been through the transformational things that have truly changed my life.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, we at least know what our purpose is and that we've been through it and that it hasn't been for nothing.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes I get overwhelmed with the numbers and the how slow things seem to move, but at least I know that I'm on the path of trying to help at least that starfish and that starfish as I
Absolutely.
throw them back in the ocean one at a
One
time.
at a time.
And you've been just a total inspiration for me, Shari. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being a guest today on the Jan Broberg show, on the podcast that I hope will help change this in our world.
I know it will. Thank you so much, Jan.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for tuning in and sharing the journey with us. Remember, healing from childhood trauma is a lifelong process, but with patience, persistence, and self-care, happiness and thriving are achievable. If you or someone you know is struggling with childhood trauma, know that you're not alone and there is help available. Please reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or mental health professional for support. And be sure to join our online community, Thrivivors, for continued support and resources on your healing journey. Connect with others who understand what you're going through and find encouragement and motivation to keep moving forward. Until next time, keep spreading love, joy, and hope. Stay happy and healthy, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Childhood Trauma, Happiness, and Thriving podcast.